She was the person who was there for anyone in need. She didn't need to know you. She never knew a stranger.
A friend of an Iowa mom of 3 talks about her best friend as Jenny Dazey's son stands trial for her brutal murder.
A woman is clearly deceased in her bed. It's bloody, and she has wounds about her face, and he notices a finger on the nightstand. This is a homicide.
Tyler Dazey has claimed his mother practiced witchcraft, but is it true? We look into the sad case of the murder of Jenny Dazey and her dog. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Jenny Dazey was found dead by a friend in her home in Dubuque, Iowa this past January. The crime was startling. No one could think of anyone who would want to hurt Jenny. But police say it was apparent almost immediately who murdered Jenny. It was her son, 29-year-old Tyler Dazey. Tyler had moved back in with his mom to help take care of her. Jenny Dazey had been diagnosed with a slow-growing form of brain cancer and was receiving treatment. On January 18th, Dazey's best friend found her dead in her bed. The prosecutor described how Jenny Dazey was found dead.
When he gets to the door, he can hear sobbing, and he goes in to find where that sobbing is coming from. As he enters, Christy opens the residence. Christy opens the door to the bedroom and latches onto Hesselbacher, saying, "Don't leave me." Christy runs to stays there while Hesselbacher looks around the room, turns on a light, and sees what scared Christy. A woman is clearly deceased in her bed. It's bloody, and she has wounds about her face, and he notices a finger on the nightstand. This is a homicide. It is then that officers learn the defendant is still in the house and not accounted for. So Hesselbacher takes Christy away from the scene while other officers defend it. Lieutenant Wilkins DeJuste arrives to help inside the house, while other officers, including Lieutenant Chad Crable, secure the exterior of the house.
Now, sadly, Jenny Dazey's dog Echo was also found dead from a head injury. Dazey's best friend, Christy Fullman, testified at Tyler Dazey's trial about seeing Jenny and Tyler together in the months before she was murdered.
In September, we're asking?
Yeah.
In September, it was Tyler and her living in the home.
Okay, and Echo.
And Echo, yes.
Okay. And were you over at the house when Tyler and Jenny were together?
Yes, all the time.
Okay, so did you see them interact with each other?
All the time. Sometimes they would laugh and joke. Other times he would name call and she would just smile and act like it didn't hurt her feelings. And then we'd move on to like the next thing. But I did one time ask Tyler, "All right, that's enough. My kids are here. Please stop." And he did respect that when my children were around.
Okay. What kind of words was he calling her?
He would call her a whore.
And would that be something routine? Like, would he do that often?
Yes, whether he was angry with her or joking around, it was just something he would always say.
Now, Jenny Dazey's daughter, Kylie Dazey, has remembered her mom on TikTok while also talking about her older brother's mental illness.
This is my brother.
Kylie Dazey told an Iowa TV station earlier this year that Tyler suffers from schizophrenia.
Before this all happened, my brother was in and out of psych wards, in and out of jail, in and out of the hospital. He asked for help. He committed himself. Our families committed him. We asked for help. We didn't get help. We got some cocktail of drugs, no checkup. Let's try it. That's not how that should be.
And as you saw, Kylie has used TikTok to talk about her brother. She doesn't believe that he belongs in jail. But now Tyler is on trial, charged with murdering his mother and facing the possibility of life without parole if convicted. He has not appeared once at his trial. Dazey wrote a letter to explain why he's not appearing. It reads, "To whom it may concern, I, Tyler James Dazey, a descendant of the Roths, a Freemason and a Hebrew Nazarite, am of God before as well as after, to be subject to slavery through usury of the law, be it constitution or amendment. I will not participate. I seek honor to become worth. I seek God. My mother would be ashamed otherwise, as is of my ancestors, to seek God in death, to become that in life. Sincerely, Tyler Dazey." Prosecutors argue that all of the evidence points to one person, and that is Tyler Dazey.
The defendant was ultimately cleared from the hospital, taken to the law center. Between the hospital and the law center, the defendant's DNA swabs were collected and his blood and urine sample were collected. The defendant told Investigator Rosenthal that he had showered right before officers came to the house. He called his mother a whore and a witch. He said he owned and had seen his hatchet just that morning. I'll tell you about the discussion he had with the defendant.
Despite Dazey's history of mental illness, his defense is not using an insanity defense. They actually claim that Tyler was simply an easy mark and suggest that Tyler's sister, Kylie, who you saw earlier and who has defended him and said he should not be in jail, could be a suspect in their mother's murder.
Frankly, Mr. Dazey making some statements that are strange, if nothing else. But what I'm going to ask you to do is keep an open mind. What I'm going to ask you to do is listen to all the evidence, okay? To things they didn't follow up on. Listen for the things that they can't provide evidence for, okay? For instance, I think you're going to hear testimony about this side door that's always locked. I think you're also going to hear testimony about who had the keys to that, and that there were two people who had the keys. One was Jennifer, and one was Kylie Frey. Okay. You're going to hear testimony that they can place Kylie. They can tell you where Kylie Frey was at 10 at night and 8 in the morning. I think you're also going to hear testimony about who had the keys to that, and that there were two people who had the keys. One was Jennifer, and one was Kylie Frey. Okay. You're going to hear testimony that they can place Kylie. They can tell you where Kylie Frey was at 10 at night and 8 in the morning, but they really can't tell you what happened in between those times, because we know she was alive at 10 at night. Okay, the evidence is going to show that. At 8:30. For sure that she was deceased, because that's when she was discovered, around that time.
Valerie Durr is Jennifer Dazey's best friend, and she is here to talk with us about her. Valerie, thanks so much for coming on. First of all, we were just talking and you said that obviously she's your best friend. You called her Jenny. So tell us about Jenny.
So Jenny and I have been friends since middle school. More like sisters. We really refer to each other as sisters for the last, I can't tell you how many years. You'll find if you speak to other people, a lot of people will call Jenny their best friend because she was just such a good friend to everybody. She was the person who was there for anyone in need. She didn't need to know you. She never knew a stranger. She loved to travel, and she was someone who could get up and go do that by herself. She was very confident and just made friends every place that she went.
Take me back to January when you found out that Jenny had been murdered and that her son was the person being accused of the crime.
It is absolutely unimaginable. It is not a thing you ever think will happen to you, to someone that you know, especially in our town. It's a pretty small town. I mean, my world stops. It doesn't go forward again like it did before. And my heart is broken more than you could imagine. And I'm not the only person. Like I said, she had countless friends, and she was so good to all of us. And it was such a pivotal point and pillar in all of our lives that there are countless countless hearts broken and lives shaken up over it.
Jenny had some brain tumors. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because it's my understanding that the only reason Tyler was living with her, and he's 28 years old, 29 maybe now, was the fact that she had these brain tumors, and he was supposed to be helping care for her.
When she was first diagnosed with these brain tumors, it was such a shock. I cried so much then, worrying I was going to lose my friend. And she went through a brain surgery in Iowa City and radiation, had another brain surgery just about 4 months before she passed. She overall was still relatively capable in terms of, her competence and such, but things were a little more difficult, especially in brain surgery recovery. Even, picking up things, lifting things, carrying in groceries, stuff like that. I'm not sure of exactly what the specific reason was or that triggered him to move back home. But it was my understanding that while he was there, he's her son, he would be helping to care for her and, help her with things around the house and, cutting grass and heavy lifting and things like that.
What was her prognosis with the brain tumors? I mean, was her condition supposed to be improving? Was this something that she was going to be living with for a long time? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was never going to improve in terms of there were tumors that simply they couldn't remove. It wasn't what most people think of when you think of brain tumors. You think of something, a lot more fatal on a short term. But unfortunately, it was more quality of life that was impacted for her and would continue to degrade over time. But my understanding from the appointments that I went to was that it wouldn't necessarily shorten her life, but drastically start changing her quality of life. Balance, hearing, pain, vision, things like that.
Oh, how sad. And so Tyler was supposed to be helping care for her and make her life easier. That's why he moved back in.
Well, like I said, my understanding was that he would do that while he was there. What the trigger was for why he moved there, I don't know. If I did know, I just don't remember.
Yeah. There's been this talk that Jenny practiced witchcraft, and I know that that's something that you really wanted to address.
Yes, she did not. I mean, like I said, I've known her since middle school. That was not a thing that she was ever involved in. She was very religious, though. Her children, her boys for sure anyways, went to, Catholic school when they were little. She went to church. She was the type of person that if you reached out to her with troubles, no matter what they were, the first thing she would say is, I will pray for you. She would tell you to pray, put it in God's hands. Don't worry so much about it. Things will work out. She was very positive and optimistic. And I think that was deeply rooted in her faith. I can only imagine that perhaps she had said something to Tyler, like, I'll pray for you. And maybe that made him angry and maybe he addressed it as witchcraft in a, snide way, but that's definitely not what she was involved in. I just think that was something he said.
Mm-hmm. And that it took on a life of its own after he said it.
Yeah, it sure did.
Tyler hasn't been appearing in court for his trial. We've seen defendants do that before, but obviously, it sounds like Tyler has some mental health issues. So what do you know about that? What can you tell us about it?
So I don't really have tons of information about any specific diagnoses or anything. I was never directly told, Tyler was diagnosed with A, B, or C by Jenny. I do know that he has been in and out of mental care facilities. I think largely voluntary, inpatient voluntarily. But I do know that, he was definitely a little bit different, but it wasn't dramatic. I'm not sure he would have stood out in a crowd.
So you knew that he had some mental health issues, but it wasn't anything where it was outwardly noticeable to you.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, he gave me a bad vibe a little bit, but no, he's not somebody that would have stood out in the crowd. Like I said, he wasn't, at least I never witnessed him talking to himself or imaginary people or inanimate objects. That's not something I ever saw.
Did Jenny ever talk with you about Tyler's mental health issues?
I mean, she would say things like he's having a mental moment, but I don't think I necessarily took it with maybe the gravity that she intended. People say that all the time, I'm having a breakdown and it's a Monday or it's stressful. And it usually is a little more lighthearted. She never expounded upon that. So I never took it to be anything of severe gravity or definitely not anything of danger.
And it's my understanding, too, that she never expressed any concerns about being afraid of him.
No, she's never said anything to me about being afraid of him. And I mean, it would stand to reason that if she were, he wouldn't have had moved into her house. So
Sure.
I just, that's not something I was told or noticed.
I know that, you had something happen in your life, before Jenny died. You had a house fire, so you weren't seeing her as often, but you guys were pretty close. And so, when you got the news that this had happened, that your best friend had died, had been murdered, I just can't even imagine what that was like, hearing that and trying to make sense of it.
It by far, I've had other deaths in my life and in my family. Some you saw coming from, say, cancer, and some you did not see coming. But this, due to the nature of how she died, it just feels so much worse. She was just ripped away from us against her will and way before her time. And it has been a very, very trying time. I have children that grew up knowing her as Aunt Jenny. Their lives have been turned upside down. And I know so many of her other friends, their kids too, called her Aunt Jenny. And that's the hardest part, telling my children, which I had to do pretty quickly because it was in the news.
As I mentioned earlier, Jenny Dazey's dog, Echo, was also killed. The dog was found with a head injury on the couch.
Yeah, and he was her pride and joy. She was so proud when she got him. He was still so very little. He wasn't even a year old. He was such a very small dog. He was a labradoodle, a miniature labradoodle, so he was pretty small. And he was so sweet. I mean, he was sweet.
What would you like to see happen with Tyler? I mean, he's not showing up at his own trial. He's waiving his appearance. Do you think he needs to go to prison for the rest of his life? What do you think needs to happen?
I do not envy this jury. I am glad I'm not on it, and I hope I never am on a jury like that. I don't know what the right thing is in my own selfish way. I would just love to see him locked up and the key thrown away forever. But that's because he took away someone I viewed as my sister, someone that I love very much and that I expected to continue to have in my life for another 20, 30 years. As far as what should happen in terms of whatever kind of mental diagnoses he has, I really don't know. I can't, I guess I should say, see past my own feelings right now. It's still way too raw. And in those raw feelings, I want nothing more for him to be locked away. But that's, again, just my own raw feelings I can't see past.
Valerie Durr, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.